This broadcast is brought to you by the British Israel Church of God. The Watchman Program. Evangelist and commentator Peter Salemi, bringing you the truth about today's world news in the light of Bible prophecy.
And greetings, friends. We are here today at the Church of God International Fellowship Group to do the interview with Bill Watson. First, we're going to fellowship with the brethren, and during that time, we are going to take a video of the service, and we are also going to take photos as well. Afterwards, then we're going to conduct the interview with Bill Watson. And when it's all done, we're going to take all the video and edit it all and then upload it to YouTube for, of course, you, the audience, to watch. So I hope you enjoy this video that we are doing with the Church of God International.
Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me.
Chapter 1 and verse 1. There's only one chapter, so we'll keep it simple. The elder unto the elect lady and her children, and that's a metaphor, figure of speech. John is addressing the church. Whom I love, this is important, brother, whom I love in the truth. There are ruses going on, untruths, lies, misappropriations, misguided ideas and concepts that are coming out of the world through education and politics, through entertainment, and all types of things along those lines that drive us into thinking that certain things are the way they are, even through the news.
Lord, I give you my heart, I give you my soul. I live for you alone, every breath that I take, every moment I'm awake. Lord, have your way in me.
He says here, for the truth's sake, verse 2, which dwells in us and shall be with us forever. Grace be with you, mercy and peace from God the Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of the Father, in truth and love. I always find it interesting that he never addresses the Holy Spirit. Boy, what a diss, you know? But I just say that in terms of the fact that there is no Trinity, because if there was, this would be a tremendous insult. He left the third person out, you know.
And greetings, friends. This is Peter Salemi, and this is a special edition of the Watchman program. We're here with the Church of God International on the Sabbath day. We fellowship with CGI, and we're here with the local pastor, Ken Allen, and the host of the Armor of God program, and regional pastor, overseer of CGI, Pastor Bill Watson. And it's a pleasure to have you here on the program. Thank you very much for doing this.
Really excited to be here. Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And how long exactly have you been a pastor?
Oh boy, I was ordained 1986.
1986.
Yeah, by Garner Ted Armstrong.
Oh,
as a matter
really?
of fact, yeah. Don't hold that against me, though.
Yeah, so you're in it for the long haul. You're not...
Yeah, I guess so. You don't have to remind me, though. More days and more years have passed than I'd like to admit.
And Ken, how about you?
Maybe Bill could tell you. You did that exit interview. Is it about 3 years now? 3 years?
3 years? Is it?
Yeah.
3 years with this particular
Yes.
congregation? I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so
He was ordained into the ministry.
I see. So there's a lot of experience here.
Oh, yeah. And then, of
Absolutely.
course, we have Horain Smith, which is also a co-pastor with Ken, simply because Church of God International's ministry is set up whereby we believe in duplicity of personalities and co-pastoring. So it's always
Or
kind of
maybe
a
duality.
or duality.
Duality.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, and so consequently, it adds to the security of the congregation.
Right,
you know.
right. Now, our audience, as I mentioned to you earlier, our audience, they're looking for churches to attend. So, and of course, CGI is one of them, one of the churches of God that we promote.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And so, what are the origins exactly of CGI?
Oh, that goes back. Officially, it was actually, it's on my birthday, July 21st, 1978. The Church of God International was incorporated by Garner Ted Armstrong and his brother-in-law, Guy Carnes, and his wife, which was, I forget her name now, was Shirley Armstrong's sister. And Garner Ted's wife also, Shirley Armstrong.
Shirley Hammer.
Yeah, Shirley Hammer. So the four of them originally were the ones that incorporated the CGI in 1978, which was a spin-out as a result of the conflict between his father, Herbert,
Right.
and Ted.
With Worldwide Church of
With
God.
the Worldwide Church of God, that's right.
I
Yeah.
see. And he pretty much, when you look at the beliefs, which I was going to ask you, but the beliefs of CGI has pretty much purged out a lot of the, let's call it Armstrongism type of thing.
I think if I was going to characterize it, it probably would be, I think we've updated some things and have added some, I think, more pragmatism to it, more practicality, and more, I believe, logic. I remember one teaching we had years ago where the teaching was that until you took the breath of life, you really weren't a human being, because that's when the spirit of man, remember that
Right,
teaching,
right.
Peter, where that's when the spirit of man came in. When you were born, you took that breath of life. And I remember some years ago, Garner Ted Armstrong in his new organization had mentioned that same teaching, and he got a hailstorm of comments over the fact that, well, if that's the case, then why is abortion murder?
Right.
You know, so the point of it is, obviously, we believe that life begins in the womb. And it has nothing to do with the spirit, the acquiring of the spirit of man upon your first breath. I mean, who knows when the spirit of man enters into a human being, and that's
Right.
just above our pay grade. We don't go there. you
Yeah,
know?
there's certain things that we just don't know about.
That's
but like,
right.
I remember Ted would say, he would quote Jeremiah, "When I was in the womb, you knew me."
That's right. Yeah.
And so he got a lot of flack for that, didn't he?
He got a lot of flack for that comment about the spirit of man entering into.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
Now,
If I may just
Yes.
interject a little there. Talking about CGI, and I think essentially, for the most part, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is that in terms of doctrines and teachings, with most of the other Church of God groups who came out of Worldwide Church of God, the basic beliefs are basically the same.
The same.
But I think the thing that distinguishes CGI, and I'm sure Bill would agree with this, is that for me personally, and coming out of Worldwide and United, I find that this, of all of them, you have the most welcoming environment.
Right.
A lot of people, you'd see a lot of people have come, and many people have come through, they don't necessarily stay, but at least people find it's a welcoming environment. They feel comfortable coming here, and we have people from so many of the other churches of God who come, whether to just visit or people just passing through. So I find that is something that really distinguishes. That you find a warm, welcoming environment.
Oh,
I think
that's
that's a
nice.
distinguishing.
So other people of the churches of God have come to this organization.
Absolutely.
You have
absolutely.
like an open door policy,
Absolutely.
not like before where you had to
No.
speak to a minister and go
No,
through this
there's
process.
not really a vetting process at all, as a matter of fact. We have actually what's called a bridge building program where we actually proactively attempt to initiate goodwill and olive branches and building bridges between organizations, if I can use those figures of speeches, to afford a camaraderie outside and beyond our own organizational boundaries. And hence we, as a result, have co-sponsored Feast of Tabernacle sites with multiple organizations. Like at Land Between the Lakes this year, we had ministers that had multiple speaking slots from the United Church of God.
Really?
We, down in St. Petersburg, Florida, had ministers from the Church of God Miami, which is an independent group, and also the Church of the Sovereign God, which is also another independent group, Sabbath keeping groups, of
Sabbath.
course, and Holy Day observance groups. And frankly, spin-outs of the Worldwide Church of God, but are more of an independent nature, you know.
I see.
But those are areas where we've co-sponsored, and I mean, when I say co-sponsored, we split costs, you know, we share in the offerings, we have different envelopes, colors, and so forth. Works out very well.
That's wonderful.
As a matter of fact, just today, our group in Kitchener, they have actually joined services with the United Church of God. They went to their location
Today?
And, yes,
Today?
that's what
Oh,
I
really?
should have gone, but we had to
That's
cancel
that's
that.
that's
So-
wonderful.
so it's, you know,
I've
it's,
always on our program here, we've always tried to promote that the Church of God membership, regardless of organization, should get together, fellowship together.
That's right.
But I mean, I hear from people that call me saying that sometimes the two organizations in the same feast site, and they don't even look at each other.
Yeah, it's a shame.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear that you
Yeah.
are working with other.
And I think it goes to the point, and I know you had one of these questions on the slate here, Peter, but I think it goes to the fact of what is the definition of the church. You know, and the definition of the church, and I think you would agree, I would hope so anyway, is that the church is not an organization. The church is not an organization, it's an organism. It's a spiritual organism. Organizations are good. The Bible talks about how administrations are certainly credible. There are different administrations. It talks about that in Corinthians and so forth, Paul does. So, you know, with that being said and considered, certainly there's reason for and justification and validation for different organizations or administrations. But shucks, we shouldn't use those as dividing tools, you know, to keep us from fellowship or enjoying each other on a broader scale and so on. So
Absolutely.
the CGI has, I think, a very focused understanding of the definition of what the church is, and we firmly believe that it is an organism, a spiritual organism.
Well, that's exactly what we believe, and like I said on our program, we always promote that we should be working together and fellowship together. And like I told you before earlier, you are the only ones that have gotten back to us. Like I sent out an email the next day, you answered me back. Everybody else, I got 2 no's without an explanation. And or they just didn't answer us.
Wow. Wow.
It's a
I'm
shame.
in some ways, I'm sorry to hear that.
So am I. All right, so you use the program, The Armor of God, as a vehicle to preach the gospel. Can you describe for us what that program is?
It's a half-hour program, much along the lines of The World Tomorrow and so forth, if in simplicity. But it's only one product of our multiple video products that we have. But to answer your question directly, it's designed around a half-hour presentation. We keep it still, though, to the limitation of television time, 28 and a half minutes, only because that if indeed we do decide to go back on TV selectively, that we don't have to do a lot of editing to the programs. We can still use them for dual purposes without having a lot of cost wrapped up in trying to modify them or remodel them. So we still keep it and adhere to that television time limit. But it is, I believe, one of the, if not the best program put on video, simply because we utilize a lot of special effects, music, roll-in B footage, you know, with pictures and so forth, PowerPoints, and try to break it up a little bit to keep the attention of the millennials, especially.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Short attention
that's
spans.
right. And do the best we can to make it interesting and to break the program up for emphatic emphasis, so that it becomes more of a magnifying teaching tool.
Right.
When a point is made, we want to bring it to your attention, and we add a picture to it, which hopefully the impression as a result of a picture and music makes a better imprint than just a voice and a word. So we use a lot of that, and granted, and admittedly, it takes a lot more post-production, you know, to put it all together. But my wife, Margie, as well as Jeff Reed and myself, we're a team of 3, and between the 3 of us, we put the product out. So it's not just all me. I mean, I pretty much produce it and so forth, but there's a lot of inputs, you know, and sharing of ideas as the program's developing, with storylines being developed. I usually give a shopping list to my wife and Jeff, you know, and he builds the storylines around the commentator's presentation. We don't talk about the subjects as far as telling the commentator what to say or how to say it. Generally, we leave that up to them to pick their own topics and so on. Then we have another product called Biblical News Updates and Commentary, which primarily that's just more or less taking a current event, world news, something that is current and contemporary in our newspapers or whatever, and really hammer it, take an approach from a biblical standpoint,
Okay.
couched in the framing of maybe even a prophetic setting, depending on what the topic may be. And then we have a third product, a video product, of which Wayne Hendricks and myself, we call it a web chat, and that's
Yeah,
just a couple
I've
of
seen
guys.
that.
Yeah, sitting
I
in
watched the
chairs.
one about the rapture,
Oh, okay.
and the one I really liked when you did about voting.
Oh,
Should
okay.
Christians vote?
Yeah.
I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
Which I agreed with you totally on what you said on that program. I've watched those programs. I found them very informative.
We had some earlier ones on the identity of America and Great Britain, too. We had two
Yes.
of them there, to your kind of point with regards to the British Israel Church
Right.
of God that you represent.
Right.
So, yeah, that works real well, and frankly, we get a lot of good positive comments from it, from the standpoint of people like to follow the storylines, because it's all unscripted, much like we're doing here, where we're just kind of talking and going through topics. We have other video products as well, though, like Jeff Reed produces Bring on the Sabbath on Friday nights. It's usually advertised on our website at cgi.org.
Bring on the Sabbath.
Bring
Yeah,
on
I've
the
seen
Sabbath.
a couple of those.
We call it bots, yeah.
Right.
And it's just a kind of a free-flowing program. People call in, hey, oh, hi, Susie, oh, Susie's on, oh, Julie's on, that kind of thing. And it's kind of a fun program. And then, of course, we have some other sermons, that we post during the weeks as the year unfolds and so on. So
Okay.
a lot of video products on our website, and I'd certainly encourage all your viewers to take a look at us from time to time when they have a chance, and as well as CGICanada.org.
Yeah. Well, the-
so we have the website here. the
And you
CGI
have
and
Church of
there's
God
also-
for Toronto specifically.
Yes.
Because this congregation is one of the biggest in North America.
The
It
biggest.
is
The
is
biggest.
yeah.
So it's
For CGI.
for CGI. Well, that's good. And I saw on the Toronto website you had some debates with
Adrian.
Muslim group.
what was his name? Pendergrass?
Oh, that
Sabbath.
was the one about the Sabbath. That was
The one about
with,
the Sabbath.
Oh, George
Yeah,
did
that
that.
was quite a
Oh,
while
that's
back,
the
yeah.
one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was
that's a
trying to
while
think.
back,
Yeah, that goes
How did-
back. And do you know what the interesting backstory on that? This is really a interesting backstory. That gentleman that George debated, some year or two later, ended up starting to observe the Sabbath day.
Really?
He started observing the Sabbath day. Of all things.
So I guess Pendergrass didn't have any effect on him. I love that last name, Pendergrass. So those debates, you even debated a Muslim,
Yeah,
That was Adrian.
Yeah, he did.
and
couple
so
of those.
did any fruit get produced from that, Ken?
As far as I know, yeah, people have, we've had people writing in. I don't know if anybody has come in terms of attendance, but we've had people, feedback.
Oh, that's good.
Positive, some negative, but
Yeah.
And I think to the point too, again, I think this goes to the objective of the church. We believe our mission, the Church of God International, we believe our mission as described in Matthew 28, to go and teach,
Yep.
to observe all those things that Jesus talked about and so on. But along with that comes, as pointed out in Matthew 24, as well as Isaiah 58, crying aloud and witnessing and so on. And so, to the point of your talking about the debate on the Muslim thing, not so much looking for, and I think going into that with the expectation of looking for converts out of the Muslim community is not the right expectation. But for witness and warning, yes, I think it's very appropriate because it was educational.
Right.
And our objective in that, in even starting that and considering it, was purely from an educational standpoint, so that people can be aware of the distinctions and the differences of these two religious ideologies, so to speak, and hopefully will be helpful for Christians to be able to better identify
Right.
by calling them out on certain things that they don't like to talk about.
Yeah, because I noticed that the Muslims try to say that there's a lot of similarities between
Right.
the two, which is not true.
Yeah, they're followers of the book.
Yeah, the followers of the book.
Yeah.
But, they don't believe in the divinity of Christ. They think Allah and Jehovah are the same, and they are not when you look at the origins of Allah and many other things. But they try to say, oh, there's a lot of similarities.
Right.
So what you're saying about witness and warning to them is, like you said, to educate them, to show them that no, there are vast differences between the two religions.
And that expectation, I think, is being confirmed, is working, because the views on YouTube have been growing ever since. I think we're up now to 5 figures or 5 digits.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah.
that's
So
fantastic.
over the what now, 2 years maybe it's been since we had it?
Debates? Yeah, it's about that.
That the viewership has grown. So
Really?
people are still watching it.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I want to talk about the leadership here, because that seems to concern a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how is the leadership of CGI structured?
You mean in Canada or
Well, I mean, as
overall?
overall as a organization.
Corporately, we're managed by two bodies. I think in simplicity, you can look at it as the board of directors and the ministerial council. And both bodies are inclusive of multiple personalities and men, and it could be on the board of directors, even women, because the board of directors is primarily focused on fiduciary responsibilities and managing the assets, paying the bills, salaries, and what have you,
Right.
for the organization. So they don't get too involved, if at all, in the sacerdotal, or liturgy portion of the church work. So with that being said, we look for people that are business oriented. We even have a lawyer on our board, that helps us with legal advice and so on, and he's part of our board of directors. We have about, I think, 9 or so guys on the board of directors. On the ministerial council, which I'm the chairman of presently, but we have term limits on that. Matter of fact, I'm in my last year, so we changed that up so that not any one person has any opportunity to accrue any kind of power base,
I see.
so to speak. And presently with the ministerial council, we have roughly about 7 guys on that. As a matter of fact, we just had our meeting last week where we have an annual meeting where we get together down in Cincinnati. That's a central place, and we talk about ministerial things.
I see. So there's not this one person that kind of controls it all. It's not like that
Not at all.
At
We have a chairman in the council, we have a chairman in the board, we have a secretary in the council, we have a secretary on the board, and on the board has a treasurer.
I
We
see.
don't necessarily have a treasurer because if we need money or want money, we appeal to the board and then they say yay or nay on that,
I see.
We have something budgeted for something. So with that being said, it keeps it simple so that if indeed there's any kind of, for instance, doctrinal questions or a change of doctrine that someone is interested in submitting an idea to, we have a method and mechanism by which they can submit a paper based on a kind of a college treatise, so to speak, format. We even have a format. They can follow it so we don't have to go through about 10 pages of a narrative, and figure
Right.
out what he's trying to say, or her, and be able to kind of get to the point real quick and so forth, and then talk about it. Like, for instance, we had some subjects we did talk about here in the meeting just about a week ago that were doctrinal in their orientation, and over the years we've debated quite a few things. And if indeed we come up with something that is that merits some attention or merits further discussion, and the ministerial council doesn't come to any kind of conclusion, we will put that out to the ministry
Right.
and let them feed back their ideas to get a broader, more comprehensive evaluation and assessment, of the topic. So the council doesn't act as a dictatorial group of guys.
Right. That was actually one of my questions here about has CGI abandoned any beliefs it had before? Has it abandoned any previous beliefs?
I wrote a list here a little bit, hot off the press, and I was trying to think about that because I know you gave me some questions before we got on the set here, and I would have to say that first and foremost, or not first and foremost, but first out of the bat was the easiest one I thought I recognized was a place of safety. You know how years ago the Worldwide
Petra.
Church, going to
Petra.
Petra, we've kind of walked away from that only because primarily Luke 10 tells us don't go into that area.
Exactly.
If you see these things happening, stay out of the area.
Stay out of the area.
Yeah, if you're
And they're telling us to go back in
go
the
back
area.
in the area. It didn't make sense. So that was certainly one. Church eras, for instance, highly speculative.
Absolutely.
When you go into Revelation 2 and 3, and you start trying to draw lines in the sand of when
Yeah.
each church ended and another one began.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
No,
Yeah.
it really doesn't. And so that one was one that we kind of abandoned. We talked about the life beginning in the womb rather than upon the first breath of the Spirit of man. Here's I think one that doesn't get a lot of press, but nevertheless was written in The Mystery of the Ages by Mr. Armstrong, Herbert Armstrong, and that was the fact that man is a default plan, and that originally the angels were intended to basically be the ones that were going to become the sons of God, the way I read it in the Mystery of Ages on the, I forget the pages, but it's in the early, about page 56 or somewhere around there. He hits it, and then he hits it again later on in the booklet.
And that was associated with the fall of Satan.
Satan, yeah,
see,
and
okay.
so when Satan fell, Mr. Herbert Armstrong took the tack that then caused God to rethink it, and then he created man
I see.
out of that. And that's
Backup plan.
Yeah, the
I
backup
remember
plan.
that, yeah.
We're the B plan.
Or the B plan, yeah.
But I think we've abandoned that and have come to really realize, I think, that, for all intents and purposes, I think you could say that perhaps Satan found out about what God was going to do and got jealous and prideful and,
Right.
ended up rebelling because he was a little bit upset over the whole thing, being that what
I never
it was.
looked into that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that is a bit changed. We've retained Christ pre-existed, and he is part of Elohim, a God being. Christ is divine. Christ is a God being. The one God movement. I think you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
There's one version that there's no pre-existence, that Christ came into existence like the old early Catholic heresy back in the day. His name slips me right now, but he was a promoter of Christ not pre-existing, and that he came into existence upon his incarnation at the birth of Mary.
Right, right.
And then also, I think, interracial marriages. The Church of God International has recognized that interracial marriages are not a is not a spiritual sin. That the fact of God discouraging the Israelites from marrying Gentile nations was primarily because of the religious ramifications,
aspect of it, exactly.
not skin color or the ethnicity that was associated with it. And I think that, unfortunately, created a lot of heartache over the years, in the days of the Worldwide Church of
Yeah.
God.
And I can think of maybe not so significant, but I think what about wearing of makeup? I think was one of the
Yeah,
other
Yeah, the
things.
makeup thing.
The makeup
Celebration of birthday. I mean, I think I remember those two.
Voting.
Voting.
Yeah.
Voting.
Well, I think more back then it was like because of the culture, maybe the way it was in the 40s and 50s, kind of attributed to those beliefs. Maybe could have been that as well. But it's good to see that you've abandoned some of those.
But I don't want
Past
to.
beliefs.
I don't want to be remiss in stating that we have used the statement of beliefs are built off of the old systematic theology project that the Worldwide Church of God compiled, but then in modifying and editing and rewriting over the years, because CGI has been existing now almost 50 years, is it? 40 years?
78 to 18 is
40 years.
40 years.
40 years, yeah. So this is our 40th birthday. Wow, time flies. So with that being said, I don't want to give the impression or the idea that we've abandoned key and core teachings.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get that straight. I'm not talking about the core beliefs of the Sabbath, the holy days.
And we have a statement of beliefs that really
On the
is
site.
on our website at cgi.org that anybody can look at, download if they want to.
Right.
That I think has been upgraded to about 34 points now, including clean and unclean meats, which we didn't have before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but now, all your publications that you have are free of charge.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You can download them,
Online.
order them, hard copies. It's all free of charge.
Right,
Yes.
whether you go to cgicanada.org or cgi.org, either one. cgicanada.org is our national website here in Canada. cgi.org is our international site for the
I
home
see.
office. Yeah.
So, exactly how many congregations do you have in the United States and Canada? You have a rough figure?
Canada, we have Toronto, Ottawa, Burlington, Kitchener, London. So we have
Kawartha
five.
Lakes?
Kawartha Lakes, yes.
Kawartha
Yes.
Lakes is the other
6 in Canada.
6 in Canada.
Um,
Canada or just Ontario?
Canada.
well,
Canada.
for Canada, we don't have any official congregations outside of Ontario.
Oh, really?
Right.
Okay.
We do have people who, are connected with us, but
Right.
no official congregations outside of Ontario.
I see.
At least not yet.
active initiatives
Yes.
and evangelistic plans of doing campaigns out in Penticton. We just did one here this year. I went out to Calgary and had a campaign out there. But again, nothing really got started yet. We need some boots on the ground out there
I see.
to get something
So you
started.
can speak more to the U.S. I'm not too sure how many we have.
Yeah, the U.S. It's hard to say. We've got. I know we've got. Boy, a lot. More than about 36, I would say, off the top of my head, of congregations. But again, it's hard to say, Peter, simply because some of our groups we would consider them to be Bible study groups.
Okay.
We have different categories that we view our groups with. We have affiliates, we have Bible study groups, fellowship groups, and then we have chartered churches. Toronto, 100 people, chartered church. My home base in Medina, Ohio, about 50 people, chartered church. Atlanta, we've got probably about 30 or so people there, chartered church. And we have Auburndale, Florida. We've got we've got Raleigh, North Carolina. And out west, we've got Dallas and Tyler and Shreveport and Texarkana. So those are all chartered churches, congregations, generally averaging probably somewhere in the vicinity of maybe 25 to 50 to 60 people is a general average of a CGI healthy church.
These congregations are listed on the
So you can
website.
find them on the website.
So you can find them on the website. So and there's contacts beside each church. Okay.
Yeah. Some are ministers, some are deacons, and some are just hosts.
I see. All right. Well, let's get into the churches. How do you feel right now, the state of the churches of God today? Like how we see the splinter groups. We see that they're scattered all over due to the falling away of worldwide back in the 90s. How do you feel about what's going on in the churches of God today?
Well, I mean, in one sense, it's sad seeing this splitting up, but in another sense also, there's a good aspect to it, because if I go back, coming out of Worldwide Church of God, if we see that organization having split up, and we see these other organizations, is that it also means that these smaller organizations are also able to reach some other groups of people that maybe the larger organization would not have been able to reach. So there's a good aspect to it.
Right.
The sad aspect is the bickering that you sometimes see and the friction between groups. But overall, it's there's another sad aspect to it too, because when you see, I mean, coming from my own experience of coming through the Worldwide Church of God, then into United Church of God, and then here, and people who you have built up relations with over the years, and people who you knew you once walked to church together, you worshiped together, and held certain core beliefs, and now you see they have abandoned those things. That's a sad aspect of it.
Yeah.
So
there's a good and bad to it.
yes.
Yeah, and I would support Ken on that perspective, and connect it up with the era of time prior to the downfall of the northern 10 tribes of Israel. You're very familiar, Peter,
Yeah.
I know you are, with how God upped the ante with his prophets. And he overlapped, contrary to the statement of God only works through one man at one time.
Yeah.
You know and I know he overlapped prophets. He brought in Isaiah, and Micah, and he had Hosea and Amos, and a lot of those guys overlapped each other.
Yep.
Amos, the old guy, prior to the real entourage of more prophets coming down, was ahead of his time, because he preached primarily before Tiglath-Pileser came in initially to meet Menahem there, in the northern 10 tribes. But the reality of it was, he was warning Israel that things were not going to get right and better for them if they didn't repent. And what happened was then, when they got closer to those invasions and so on, God increased different prophets. And to Ken's point, I think people were able to identify with Isaiah where they wouldn't identify with Micah. Mm-hmm. They identified with Hosea, but they wouldn't identify with Isaiah. That kind of stuff.
I see.
Same thing with, you had Jeremiah and Daniel. You had Ezekiel. All going on at the same time.
Yep.
Ezekiel down by the river Kibar, Daniel up in the mountain, or not the mountain,
Babylon.
Babylon there, at the king's court, and then of course Jeremiah in the front lines there in Jerusalem. So you have these different ministries, different administrations. We touched on that a little bit before. That I think, to Ken's point, adds to the variety of attraction. Your work is different than the Church of God International's work, and consequently, you're going to attract people that we might not attract. Your personality on a video medium might attract a particular type, where mine would attract a different type. Does that make you better or me better than you? No.
No.
It broadens the market. It
Right.
broadens the appeal. And I think, again, to Ken's point, is a very valid point, it just illustrates to me we're in the latter days. You know, of the
I've never
birthright.
really thought of
Comes
it that
back
way.
to
That's
the old
interesting.
fishing example.
Yeah,
I mean, you need different types of bait.
exactly.
That's
different type
right.
of fish.
Yeah.
So, you know, so
I never
what-
thought of it that way. That's
what would work
that's
for
yeah,
one,
yeah.
would not necessarily work for the
And,
other.
and it goes to the point we got to respect each other. You know,
Yes.
you're here interviewing us, and we want to be interviewed by you because you know what? We're friends. We're in the same boat. You know,
Absolutely.
we may be sitting in different seats, but we're in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the fact of it is, as long as we respect one another and speak highly of each other, and we have this mutual sense of mission in accomplishing the propagation of the gospel, hey, why can't we do these kinds of things? You know.
Exactly. What Christ said when the disciples saw some people preaching the gospel, and they said, "Hey, they're not part of our group."
Right.
He says, "Well, if they are for us, right?
That's right.
They're for us. So
Yeah.
what's the problem? There's no
Right.
problem.
Yeah.
We're all on the same side."
Exactly.
I didn't quote it verbatim, but you understand what I'm saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I understand, but you know what? That's interesting how you put that. I've never heard that put it in that light before. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a good validation that we're in some pretty intense times of getting near the finish line for this country, the birthrighted nations of Israel, to meet the payday.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about some of these leaders in the church that are making these outrageous claims? Do you call them cult leaders? Because some of them are making these claims like there's Zerubbabel and Eliakim, and there's a new claim that there's a new throne of David, and that the prayer rock that Herbert Armstrong prayed at is the new stone of destiny.
Yeah.
How do you feel about
Well,
things like that?
I don't want to give any initials out or mention any names such as David Pack or Gerald Flurry. but more importantly to your question, I think this is just me maybe, but there is a very obvious unhealthy environment in those organizations, because you look at the fruit of some of their work and their ministry, and what you find them doing is creating division in families.
Right.
I mean, some of them have made edicts whereby even a husband can't talk to his wife because the husband is going to one organization, Sabbath keeping organization, and the wife is going to, the Philadelphia, or in this case, the Restored Church of God. And I use those two as examples because I believe firmly that those two organizations are probably the most unhealthy, sadly,
Yeah.
among the churches of God that we have in our culture, and do lend and tend to lead suspicion of other organizations being unhealthy, because we all get lumped into that same
Guilt.
basket.
Guilt by association.
Yeah, and it's unfair oftentimes to us who are trying to be healthy and pragmatic and realistic about our doctrinal beliefs and statement of beliefs and so on, and to develop pleasant environments for families and bringing up your children and having them educated in a balanced fashion in this postmodern day that we're living in. So it's hard, and and that's why I'm not shy or bashful about calling people out. Paul called people out, Hymenaeus and
Yeah.
the Alexander the coppersmith. People say, well, you shouldn't call out people's names. Well, Paul did it, and when, a spade needs to be called a spade, and you need to be warned about these things. I think in all due respect, it'd be remiss of us not to warn and to at least mention some of these things and
Yeah.
give fair warning to people.
Because they are happening, and
they are.
like you said, it's unhealthy,
Yeah.
and it needs to be called out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's past unhealthy. Some of these, because I mean, in more recent times, we have heard about some of these groups
Yeah.
mentioned, and a number of people who were part of these organizations who have actually
Yeah.
committed
Well, I've had
suicide.
phone calls from some of these people.
Some people have actually committed suicide.
Crying.
Where, yeah.
Suicide.
Yeah.
Crying. I had one lady was right away. I said, hello? Oh, is this Peter Salemi? I said, yes. And right away she started crying,
Wow.
telling me about what's going on. I feel so bad for these people. But it's hard for them to get out.
Yeah.
It's
But you know what, too? I mean, to your point, the fact that calling them out, that's one aspect of it. But I think there's also the other side to it, in that creating an environment like we have here,
Yeah.
to make people know that, well, you do have alternatives.
Right.
You know, if
You do
you're
have
over here
alternatives.
and you see this autocratic leadership or oppressive type of leadership,
Yeah.
you don't have to stay there. There are alternatives like
Yeah.
the CGI, your group, or wherever else
That-
that
and
people
this
can
is-
actually come.
And this is one
To
of the
find-
reasons why we're doing
Exactly,
this
they can
program,
find
to
a
let
home.
people know that there are alternatives
Right.
out there.
Right.
That people that they stick to the basic core beliefs,
Yeah.
and there's fellowship, and you have to deal with a lot of the stuff that they're dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah. I think if, you know, a person comes into an environment where they're being dictated to, and the minister's getting in their face about you know, what they're doing in their personal life and so forth, you need to really put up your antenna in that kind of situation, because the ministry of Jesus Christ is a servant eldership, a servant-oriented ministry that should be easy to entreat and result in being helpers of your joy.
Right.
And that goes without saying, that if indeed that ministry is not functioning in that line of service, well, then you need to look at that with a highly suspicious and jaundiced eye, you know, and really critically think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've always preached that the ministers are helpers of your joy.
Yeah.
They're not dictators over you.
Policemen.
Right. Yeah, at best we're guides. At
Exactly.
best we're guides.
Guys, because you got to work out your own salvation. The minister's there to help you.
Yeah.
Bible study, show you some scriptures, and it's ultimately up to you.
That's
You got to
right.
work out your own salvation.
Because that person is owned by God.
Yeah.
They're not owned by the minister. The minister, I mean, yeah, you're certainly, I think there's a certain responsibility we have as teachers and
Yeah.
protectors and so on of the flock and what have you, and that only goes, though, so far. The fact of it is, that individual, that Christian, is truly God's possession. It's
Yeah.
not the minister's possession. I used to always get bothered by
My
the
people.
Yeah, the minister say, "My people," and that's my deacon. You know, no, it's not your deacon. You acknowledge the fact that God's working in him, and he's God's deacon. You know?
So we kind of touched on this, but the belief of the one true church is basically, this is CGI. There are other congregations out there, and they are part of the Church of God.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As Christ said, "I'm the vine, you are the branches," and so on. One body, many members.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you believe that there are other churches of God out there that
Doing the work.
that we don't even know of,
That's right.
that are out there, and they're part of God's church. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, years ago, even in the Worldwide Church of God days, if I remember correctly, I was in the Worldwide Church of God from the years 1971 through 83. About 12 years, my wife and I and family were in the Worldwide Church of God. I was baptized back in 71. But the point of it is, I remember a story in the 70s where the Worldwide Church of God stumbled on Sabbath-keeping, Holy Day keepers in South America somewhere.
Really?
Didn't even know they existed.
China.
Yeah.
China.
And then there was another group, primarily African American group in the state of Tennessee, that had been keeping the holy days and the Sabbath prior to Herbert Armstrong even being involved in the ministry back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. 'Cause I
Really?
think Herbert got involved in 1927.
Right.
These guys go back before that. And they were keeping the holy days and the Sabbath as well.
Right.
And their headquarters is in, I think it is, the state of Tennessee in the U.S.
Plus, there are others, big organizations like the Church of God, Seventh Day,
That's right.
the Seventh Day Baptists. I mean, you can't really exclude them, can you?
No.
Because they are Sabbath keepers, they're keeping God's law.
And in all due respect, our connection to the Church of God Seventh Day through, the great disappointment, William Miller,
Yeah.
and Brinkerhoff, and all of those guys, Dobbs. In the early 1900s, late 1800s, we can't deny our connection to them because that's where we came out of.
Right.
Cranmer, he was another guy back in the early 1900s.
Yeah. Well, some people, when they ask me, well, are you a Seventh Day Adventist? Or I try and tell them we come out of the Church of God. It's a Church of God not movement. It's not really movement. How did I put it?
Culture.
Culture, tradition. Church of God, Sabbatarian. Somebody just asked me a couple days ago, where do you come from? I tell them it's a Sabbatarian, and they know about the Sabbath because of the Jews.
Right.
And I say, I didn't know that Christians celebrated the Sabbath. I tell them, you'd be surprised how many Christians celebrate the Sabbath. There's one organization, there's 5 million of them,
Yeah.
the Adventists.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I try and say that we come from a Church of God Sabbatarian tradition.
That's right. Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely.
Now, CGI, when it comes to the Watchman work, is that still your primary focus when you're doing the television program?
I would think the term watchman certainly is appropriate from the standpoint of what we are functioning as, because the Armor of God program can be, I guess, perceived as a trumpet or a watchman venue in terms of some of the subjects that we cover. However, I also look at it as an educational venue because we cover a broad range of topics. We'll talk about child rearing, we'll talk about Christian living,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about doctrinal issues, baptism, tongues, holidays, holy days, all these things. So in many respects, do we emphasize that term? The Church of God International, I would say we probably don't emphasize it as much. Are we doing it? Yes,
you are.
we are. I don't believe we'll make an issue out of terming it that way.
I see.
But the fact of it is our work, our function, what we're doing, like biblical news updates and commentary, that video product is all Watchman stuff because it's a program designed essentially around purposely addressing head-on, in your face, a counterpoint of framed from the Bible and addressing some social issue or political decision that was made or some religious movement that's going on, and we address everything from pedophilia to the homosexual environment of the Catholic Church, to trafficking, politics, legalization of homosexual marriages that occurred some time ago in the U.S. and all of that. A lot of stuff that we cover that are social issues that are really religious issues. And some people, they say, well, they get mad at me because they say, well, Bill, you're talking about politics. We should be talking about politics. But now, wait a minute. Abortion is a moral issue that politics hijacked. Same-sex marriages is a moral issue. That falls right smack dab into the Bible's structure of distinction.
That's where it goes all the way to the beginning.
But the politicians hijacked it, legalized it, and so now it's political because it's a social issue.
Right.
So I think we need to, take into account the fact that you can't get away from talking about politics. The prophets talked to the kings. They were always in the face of the politics. John the Baptist got his head cut off because he was involved talking to the politicians of his day. And Jesus took them on one by one. The thing of it is, I think people need to realize we will never tell anybody how to vote. And we won't even tell you to vote, because that's just the way the Church of God International is. You're responsible. You've got to own these decisions because you're a sovereign individual that has the sovereign right to make your own choices.
Right. So you won't tell people how to vote. You won't promote any one political party or political leader, whatever, but your congregation, they can go out and vote if they want to. That's totally up to them. I see.
Absolutely.
Well, now, having said those things about Jesus, John the Baptist got his head cut off, and so on, has the CGI received any opposition from the secular world because you're preaching some of these things like abortion, same-sex marriage?
Only in the sense of our freedom of speech being attacked. Currently, right now, on the internet, as much as we would like to think the internet is free from censorship, we're finding out it's not. And we are being challenged over and over. Jeff Reed, primarily our point person who handles a lot of the appeals that we get slapped with when we title a program using a certain word, and it's rejected and consequently put off, and we're not able to transmit it until we appeal or concede to changing the word to something else.
Yeah.
And so I would say, to your point, the short answer to that is not yet, except we are now beginning to recognize our freedom of speech is from time to time being infringed upon.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, even when you said about the internet, like I mean, look what happened to Alex Jones
Yeah.
when he got taken off all social platforms.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Peter, to that point, we have taken the initiative to back everything, all of our products that are on YouTube, everything is all backed up and preserved off the internet in our own memories.
Yeah.
So we've got, I have an actual reservoir of all of our products that we've ever done.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
you wake up
And
to
it's
that,
gone.
And it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing that now.
I would suggest you do that.
I do that.
Yeah.
I was doing that from the beginning. I have a
Okay.
hard drive at home about that big, and it's all downloaded there.
That's good. Yeah.
But even Rebel Media, I don't know if you're familiar with Rebel Media. They're mainly in Canada, and they're backing up all their stuff now, and they even started their own app just in case
Wow.
YouTube kicks them off because they got like over 1 million subscribers. That's a lot of subscribers. Alex Jones had 2 million subscribers and just
And a
gone.
business.
Yeah.
He was selling stuff, and he had, I mean, that was his business, his livelihood.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I understand that the secular world is beginning to shut down a lot of our rights and freedoms.
And you have them controlled. You know, Facebook is controlled by, what's his name?
Zuckerberg.
You know, and you've got Bezos of Amazon and
Twitter.
Google and Apple, you know,
Yeah.
Cook. And hey, they're big, and I hate to say it, but nevertheless, I think in some respects it might be good that they begin to break them up like they did the telephone companies.
Right,
You know.
right. Or was it British Petroleum they split in 4?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
The Rockefellers.
Yeah, the Rockefellers, that's it.
That was right out of Cleveland too, where I'm from.
So what, do you know exactly what the growth rate is of CGI? Is a growth rate, is it fast, slow, is it steady?
Hard to say. Yeah, hard to say, because population-wise in our congregations, we're not.
Yeah, but I know here locally, Toronto, we've been, since the last 6 months, we've been having like a steady flow of new visitors,
Okay,
and quite a few have stayed with us. So we've seen quite a bit of growth over the last 6 months or so.
okay.
We've got
Since
hot
last-
spots,
Yeah.
and I'd say Toronto has always been somewhat of a hot spot. You know,
Yeah, it's been like that for a while, Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Even back when Ted was in this church, I remember back in the 90s, they had a personal appearance campaign, and there was like 700 people
Wow.
that showed up at that, back when Desmond Burke was in
Oh,
charge
yeah.
of Canada.
Yeah.
Which
He
I
passed away, by the way.
Yeah, I talked to his wife.
Did you?
She called me up.
Oh.
Believe this, she called me up because I did a video. A lot of people wanted to know what my background was.
Yeah.
So I did a video. Who is Peter Salemi? And I spoke about that appearance campaign. She called me up, and she didn't give me her married name. She gave me her maiden name, and she says,
Oh,
"You
you
know,
didn't
my husband
recognize
was in charge of that." I go, "Who's your husband?" Desmond Burke.
Ah.
I said, "You know, Desmond Burke. Desmond Burke was the one that baptized me as well."
Oh.
And she says, "Oh, it's so wonderful to see the fruit of my husband's work
How
through
about
you
that?
and all this." And
Yeah.
it's nice talking to her.
Sure.
And she's still in BC.
Yeah.
And she says there's a lot of Church of God people in BC where she is. So I think there's a lot of people that could be interested
Yeah.
in CGI. But like you said, there should be boots on the ground to.
And we're going to continue, I think, to press that initiative to see if we can, hopefully, God be praised for it, to start something. You know, certainly
Yeah.
it's up to Him, His will, but we'll certainly try to make ourselves available to see if indeed it'll be honored, you know, in that way. But to your question also with regard to growth, it's hard to gauge growth from the standpoint of the fact of just bodies,
Numbers.
coming to church services. I would say, though, that we, CGI overall internationally, has seen a tremendous amount of growth in terms of views on the YouTube, because we manage all of that, and as you probably do the same, can account for how many views you get, how many page turns you get on your internet website, and so forth. And we're up in the millions now of page views, and our Facebook reach is in 6 figures, you know, so, and that's every week.
Yeah.
Consequently, you know, and we're sending out thousands of CDs and booklets every week. So with that being said, we have seen an awful lot of growth in addition to the blessings of finances. the Church of God International right now is in the best financial shape it's ever been in its history, even going back to the days of Ron Dart and Garner Ted.
Right.
So with that, again, being said, we view growth and blessings in different categories, and I would have to say that we're very healthy, we're very progressive, and I think certainly in due time, as things begin to perhaps get worse, I hate to say that, but nevertheless it does, as long as we're there for them, I think we will see, God willing, an influx of people looking for answers.
Right.
And it's important for us to just be there. You
Oh,
know, we need to be there
that's
for them.
fantastic. It's good to hear that.
Yeah.
So the web links are, is it cgi.org is the main site.
That's the international main website. Yeah.
Okay, and the Canada one?
CGIcanada.org.
cgicanada.org, and then there's CGI Toronto.
Yeah, so each of the local congregations do have their own website, but everything is linked to the main
And all
national
the
website.
contact information
Yes,
is
so
there.
all the sites are linked. So
Yeah.
we are linked also with the Tyler site, which
Okay.
is where our headquarters is.
We have on the main website at cgi.org. On the top, you'll have
International
congregations.
congregations.
You hit the drop
Menu, yeah.
menu, and it'll say international congregations. You hit that, and Canada will come up. Jamaica, Australia, the Philippines, and so on.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do is when we do the video, upload it, we'll put all the links in the blog post for everybody to click on if they want to check out your website.
Oh, okay.
And,
And we have one in Medina too, CGI
Medina.
which is my home base.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, before we close, I want to give you just a little gift
Oh.
from Bill and I. Just a little thank you for doing this interview with us. We were supposed to be two, or I would have got you two. But we understand your program is called the Armor of God. So we got you an Armor of God keychain.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Peter.
Just a little thank you for doing this interview for us.
How about that? You want it?
Oh, you keep it.
Your feelings aren't hurt, are they?
No.
It was originally supposed to be the two of us, but when Bill said, let's have the local pastor, I said, fine, or else I would have got you one too.
That's all right. That's all right.
No, thanks,
So that's
Peter,
a little
very
thank
much.
you
Yeah,
for doing
thank
this
you.
interview. We thank you for letting us fellowship with you this Sabbath. It was a wonderful time, great sermon,
Thank you.
and hope maybe we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. And also, perhaps you could give me your link too, and we'll put you on as one of our partners on our partner page.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
We'll list you there.
Okay,
as
that'd be
well.
great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, this is Peter Salemi signing off with Bill Watson and Ken Allen here at CGI. This is Peter Salemi saying goodbye, friends, and we'll see you here next time on the Watchman program.